Hey folks, how you doing? Today we're going to take a quick look at Unjust by Cummings. And let's go ahead and just jump right in. Let's look at the title. I don't know if it's the title, it's the first line, but people refer to it as the title. Now you'll notice it starts with the small I and then a capital J on Unjust with a blank in between. What does that do for us? What do we get out of that? And a lot of people suggest that it recalls or causes them to think of the word injustice. Something is unfair, it's an injustice. So that's one element. Another possibility is that when you say something like, well, I'll be back in just a minute, in just a short time, it reflects that something happens and it doesn't take very long. Now, we're going to return to the title after we get through the poem and try to apply those two ideas. Let's just dive further in. We go to line 2. In just spring, when the world is mud. Now you'll notice the line ends with mud in that hyphen, and it picks up on line 3 with luscious. Why did E. Cummings divide up the line that way? One is to emphasize mud. The other is to emphasize luscious. How do we use the word luscious? When do we apply it? Well, often with food, chocolate cake. Oh, that's luscious, some dessert of some kind. And here we're talking about mud. Who finds mud luscious? Most adults probably would say not them, but very likely it would be, children, when they're toddlers, 2, 3, 4. A lot of children love to play in the mud. I could tell you stories about my children when they were that young. And so that does suggest we're in the world, the realm of children. And that's reinforced by what comes next, which is the little lame balloon man. And you know how children love balloons. And when they come to the park, the guys that have the long balloons and they make into animal shapes and this, that, and the other. My children, I can remember one time in the park, they spotted a balloon man and they just took off running like crazy toward him, almost like a magnet. Okay, we had to chase after them. Okay, so I think that's what E. Cummings is suggesting here. Now, the word lame, it's not the modern definition of lame. It's, which means boring or weak or something like that. Lame means the traditional definition, and the one used here is something wrong with your foot, you have a bad limp, maybe you're crippled in some way. Yeah, that's the meaning of lame. Okay. Then we jump down because the balloon man is whistling, and you'll notice we have the gaps in the next line. Whistles, blank or gap, far, gap, and we. Now, I'm going to return to the discussion of those gaps in a minute. Let's focus on the we, the W-E-E. Well, on one level, it means we, all of us, humanity, human beings. On the other, some of you may recall a Geico commercial from years past, the insurance company, Geico. And I remember seeing on TV they had a little pig, a little piglet of some kind, his head out the window of the car going, wee, wee, wee. And I think that goes back to the childhood kind of little game. Mom touches the toe of her baby and says, this little piggy went to market. Then the next toe, this little piggy stayed home. And then the next toe, this little piggy had roast beef. The next toe, this little piggy had none. And finally with the little toe, and this little piggy went wee, wee, wee all the way home. Well, of course it expresses glee and happiness and fun. So you can see we are in the world of childhood, and perhaps we could even go so far as say childhood innocence, innocent playing, just joy for the sake of joy that children might have. Well, in response to the balloon man's whistles, you have Eddie and Bill. And you can see in line 6 how Eddie and Bill the names are shoved together, no spaces. And let me just read it. And Eddie and Bill come running from marbles and piracies, and it's spring. Okay, so why are they shoved together? Well, could be those two boys are fast friends. They're together. They're buddies. So the little boys are together. Another possibility is, children when they're running and playing, they get really excited and they go, "Oh, mommy, me and Bill," they just run everything together, kind of this breathless kind of excitement. Maybe it suggests that a little bit as well. And we can see they're playing games, or they're coming from their games toward the balloon man. The games are marbles and piracies. Now, traditionally, way back in the day, marbles was mostly a boys' game. Girls did not do that all that much, and it was boys who played that game. Now, these days, I don't know what games little guys, maybe they're playing on their cell phones when they're 3 years old. Yes, some of them actually are. I know that for a fact. I've got a grandson, and he knows more about cell phones probably than I do. And he's only 4. No, 5 now, excuse me. He's 5. Piracies. Did you ever play cops and robbers, cowboys and Indians, pirates? Yeah, those were typically boy games, and we used to play them back in the day. Again, I don't know what very young children play these days. Maybe not so much, but it was pretty common then, and I certainly engaged in those activities, as well as my other friends, boys' friends. Let's keep going, though, because the girls are coming. When the world is spring, it's spring. When the world is puddle wonderful. Now, that kind of parallels the mud luscious. So, yeah, E. Cummings is driving it home. Little children love to play in the mud, or at least traditionally again. And rain puddles. Oh my God, I can't tell you how many times I played in the rain puddles. And even in the gutter of the street after a rain and the water was running, we used to build dams and all kinds of stuff. It was great. So yes, childhood, young children. Now in this case, we go to the next line and we see in this puddle wonderful world, the balloon man is still there, except he's changed. He's been transformed. He's the queer old balloon man. The queer old balloon man whistles far, gap, and gap we. Now the gaps are bigger. Compare the gaps there with the gaps up in line 5. What's going on with the gaps? We'll come back to that in a minute. Let's talk about the balloon man. Originally, he was the little lame balloon man. Okay, poor little guy, he's got a limp. Let's buy a balloon from him, blah, blah, blah. Here, however, he's the queer old balloon man. That's a different tone. Queer is not the modern meaning of gay. It goes back to the traditional meaning here, which is strange, weird, odd. So you got this weird old guy in the playground. Should we get out our cell phones and call the police department? I mean, do we want this guy hanging around our kids? Maybe not. So a sense of threat, of some kind of darker element is coming into the poem here. Now, as far as those gaps, let's go back up to the first one. This is where we had the little Geico pig here, all happy and playing. But with the gap, you have to read the line differently. It slows it down, which brings in, again, that darker element. Let me read it. The little lame balloon man whistles, far and wee. Instead of reading it this way, the little lame balloon man whistles far and wee. You see, it changes the whole dynamic of that line. Same here with the second introduction in line 13 of that phrase, whistles far and wee. Now, you'll notice another interesting element here. If we go back to the originals, whistles is on the same line with far and wee, and we don't have a gap. So you could read it like this. The little lame balloon man whistles far and wee, and Eddie and Bill. So it kind of elides or comes together there. But the gap is different here. Whistles is on the previous line, in this case line 12, and it's just far and wee. So we don't, the wee part expressing joy and happiness, not so much. It's kind of muted. It's, again, maybe darker. Now you see here Betty and Isabel in the next line, and Betty and Isabel come dancing from their games, hopscotch and jump rope. They're together, no spaces. Obviously friends, obviously stressing their togetherness. And so we have a situation where up above the boys are together, not with the girls. And here the girls are together, not with the boys. Okay. And when you go to a playground, if you've ever taken, you have little brothers and sisters or, other members of your family that are young and you take them to the playground, when they're very young, the boys don't typically play with the girls. They're go off and do their thing. They play their games together, and the girls are the same way. They go and do their things. So there's a kind of a separation. It's just natural at that age. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind as we go forward. Now we have the girl games, hopscotch and jump rope. That I know when I was in kindergarten, those were girl games. At recess, the boys did not play those games, and they did, and not at all. In fact, one time the girls were doing their fancy jump rope thing. Two girls were spinning the jump rope, and one in the middle doing all kinds of fancy jumps and skips and hops and all, and they were singing and chanting at the same time. Some of you've probably seen that. So I thought, oh, I'm going to do that too. I can do this. So I got in there to do it, and I tripped over the rope and down I went. Highly embarrassing. I didn't try that again. But anyway, these were, I mean, even though boys can do these things, just like girls can play marbles and pirates, these were games that mostly appealed to girls. Now, the balloon man's coming again. Spring's coming again. And it's spring, line 18. Now look here. We have a stair step or some other form in the way the lines are arranged. And the balloon man himself has transformed another time. He's not just lame, he's goat-footed. What's that all about? And then on line 21, we see he's the balloon man, capital M, kind of emphasizing his manness, his adulthoodness, of however you want to say it. I think I'm definitely calling the cops now. Get this guy out of the playground with all these little kids. So there's the sense of threat of something not so good happening is much stronger here. Now, it turns out, when I asked you to read this poem in the homework, I wanted you to look up the Greek god Pan. And it's related to this. Let's take a look at the Greek god Pan. Let me go to Chrome. We'll do it images. Okay. Greek god, not greed, oh my gosh. Greek god Pan. Let's look at some images. Okay, those aren't the greatest things. Let's get rid of the Greek part and just put God Pan or Pan God. I've done this before, and usually I get better images. Let's see. That's not so great. This is Chrome, isn't it? Let me just try Pan God. I just did this in class the other day. I got some good images. Okay, these are okay. Listen, some of these are very rude and crude. You can look closely on your own and see the sexual element kind of being manifested in these images. And you can see they're kind of dark. Look at this one. There's kind of something demonic. I don't know, we lost that. Oh, so sorry, I didn't mean to show that. Okay. Oh, bad news. As I said, some of these are pretty rude. Sorry about that, guys. That was a total mistake. Yeah, you can see the kind of evil look on Pan. Now Pan, and he's got goat feet. Let's see if we can get one with goat feet here. Yeah, you can tell he's got hooves in that one. And the other ones, he's got hooves. You can see there's a silhouette. So he's half man and half goat. Now, traditionally, originally in Greek culture, he was the god of fields and streams. And he oversaw the renewal of spring, of life each spring, after the winter. And of course, how do you get renewal? You get it through sex. Male and female come together and make babies, and life starts again. And that's what Pan represented in a lot of ways. And over the many centuries, he began to be associated much more with lust and sexual urges and that kind of stuff. And fathers would go to the temple and pray that their daughter would not be influenced by Pan. And you can see in this picture, he's holding a pipe. Often this is pictured, let me see if I can find an image here. of reeds, made of reeds. Boy, there's a lot of rude images here on Chrome, aren't there? Okay, so, but I wanted to show you a panpipe. Here's one. Let's look at this one. Okay, you can see it's a series of reeds held together, and that's called a panpipe or syrinx. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right. The word panic originally meant, panic, pan. It comes from pan, and it originally meant sexual hysteria. Now, over the many centuries, it's broadened to include any kind of hysteria, really upset craziness, that kind of stuff, panic. So it's very interesting, and he represents lust and extreme lust, that kind of stuff. Now, the early depictions of Satan in the Christian Bible look pretty much exactly like Pan. Let's see if we can get an image representation from that. Let's go early Christian devil. Let's see. Do we have some imagery, some illustrations from the Bible, perhaps? I hadn't looked at this ahead of time, but yeah, generally speaking, some of them. Well, here's one. It looks a little like Pan, just the head. Now, I think also there's some where he has the goat-footed kind of representation. Now, because he's a goat, and goats live on mountainside, let's just go back to the poem. Let's forget all the Pan stuff, all these images. Oh my God. Let's go back to the poem. You see the stair-step pattern? A lot of critics have likened that to a mountainside, and Pan lives on the mountainside. So E. Cummings is putting that in as, again, kind of an allusion, a reference, kind of driving the point home. Now, finally, we get to the end. And now look at the gaps. These words are on separate lines. So you read them really much more darkly. Let's see, the balloon man whistles far, and we. And critics have said this kind of represents children being pulled away from the the balloon man and his whistle, his panpipes, pulled farther away as they go into adulthood. So what do we got here? We've got this world of innocence, of children, innocent of sex. The boys don't play with the girls, blah, blah, blah. But at a certain point, we all grow up, right? And we are lured together. When you bring little boys and little girls together through the influence of Pan, well, sparks fly, things happen. That's what happens when little boys and little girls get together, isn't it? That's how life gets renewed. It's just the normal way of things. It's just spring. It is. That's just life. That's the way it happens. The world goes around. And in this case, I think E. Cummings is suggesting it's something of an injustice. It's unfair because that innocence disappears so quickly. And it's kind of a wonderful world of joy and innocence and just growing up and living that children go through. A lot of people in literature, Western literature in particular, have idealized childhood. And so here, after a time, they have to grow up, and it's an injustice. And it happens quickly, in just a minute. Okay, it really does seem that way if you're a parent. You blink and your kids are in college. What can you do? And you look back and say, wow, where did all that go? All that childhood stuff that we used to enjoy with our children. So that's the poem. Now, we're going to do a student paper on this poem in class. And I want you to just keep these ideas in mind so we can make sense of that paper. So that's the lecture for this particular discussion. I hope you all are having a great day. I'm going to close it off here if I can do that.